You've never seen it before, and I've never given it before. This is the first time ever, definitely. So, you know, that's a lie. You're in a time loop, and I've given this once before. So, welcome to Why We Love Time Loops.
Yeah.
So that's, oh my God, it's gonna make a noise every time I do this. All right. So why do we love them time loops? Well, they're easy tragedy, and we love watching our favorite characters suffer. Well, yeah.
Oh.
There you go, there's your answer. But I think what makes time loops so special of a genre is definitely the ability to invoke this sort of moral dilemma that we're going to talk about, and with it, you know, those like deep philosophical questions, right, that just are part of the genre, kind of are tragic quite often, and suffering, great. It's good plot. So the most prominent example of this, obviously think of Undertale. A very emotional game on its own, but once you understand everything that's like really going on, and you learn about Flowey. Flowey's a little flower who comes to you at the beginning of the game and is all intimidating and mean and tries to kill you. But in Undertale, you're playing as the human character Frisk, and as with any video game, you have the ability to save. You also have the ability to reset or go back to the beginning of the game. But the thing about Undertale is that it reads you, it knows what you're doing, and it remembers that you've saved and reset your game. This is a special ability that is given to a character in the Underground, which is where the game takes place, who has the most of this ability called Determination. And Flowey used to be that character who had the ability to save and reset until Frisk comes into the picture. But because of circumstances, he's unable to like feel anything. No emotions happening in there, no satisfaction, no happiness. And so this quote here is, I think, just a perfect summation of the tragedy of time loops. I've done everything this world has to offer. I've read every book, I've burned every book. I've won every game, I've lost every game. I've appeased everyone, I've killed everyone. Sets of numbers, lines of dialogue, I've seen them all. So let's break it down. This is how I like to categorize the specific types of time loops that I'm talking about. So first off, what is our audience interaction consuming the series or playing the game? Are we aware that there's a time loop going on, or are they unaware and it's like a spoiler, surprise, plot twist that a time loop is happening? And then, what are we trying to get out of this time loop? Are we trying to find this optimal future in order to leave the time loop where everything is happy, where you've maybe fixed all of your mistakes, because that's part of a time loop? What if we could go back and fix everything we think is wrong? And doesn't that just create some trauma? Or are we trying to remain in the time loop? Do we have this specific span of time that we really like, and maybe we don't want to leave the time loop? Maybe we haven't gotten what we want out of this, or maybe this is a safe space in this portion of time right here that we don't want to leave, and that's why we're time looping. So the question kind of becomes, are we trying to break the time loop, or are we trying to stay in it? So let me give you some examples. First off, for the audience is aware, Optimal Future, we have Higurashi no Naku Koroni, which is a visual novel and anime. There's a bunch of animes. The one that I'm talking about is the original set of 2004 anime episodes, which occur in arcs. So each arc is one time loop, and at the end of every loop, most of the cast is dead, because there's a kind of a murder mystery going on. And every loop, we see about the same amount of time, and we see kind of a similar story unfold, but from a different character's perspective. So, for example, in the first arc, we're introduced to this guy, Keiichi, and if that's not just like anime pro tag, right? Like, that's just a guy. And we start with him, and you're like, okay, this is like the new guy in town, we're gonna watch his perspective. No, he goes crazy and starts killing people. But it's great. What did you just say?
He has a fantastic
He sure does. He kills people with a baseball bat. So in the first arc, we're following him, but then at the end, enough people are dead, and he's gone crazy, so time resets. and we go back to the beginning of the events, and we might be following a different character's perspective. So what does this do? Well, he's not the protagonist, the little girl's the protagonist. It's not until the second season, which are the answer arcs. This is how Higurashi is set up, so you basically have a bunch of arcs that are like 4 to 7 episodes usually, that are just the mystery, and they're called the question arcs, so you gotta figure out like what's going on. And then you have the answer arcs, which do a different character's perspective and reveal how it all happened, what was actually going on. And usually they're from this girl Rika's perspective, and she's the true protagonist, and the one behind the looping is this little ghost chick called Hanyu. And Rika is a little girl. She's like, I don't know, she's like 10 or something. She's tiny. She's like 100. So, you know, we got it's that trope. But like, she's a mature adult who's been trapped in this child's body for about 100 years. And it's always kind of hinted that like something's up with her, but there's this very gradual shift to slowly focusing more and more on her until we realize until we get to like the arc that is from her perspective, and we see her mask fall, and it turns these individual stories of like, the murders usually happen in different ways every time, so all these individual stories of like how this character died or why this character suddenly go insane. Now it is a cohesive and meaningful mystery for the entirety of it, and each of those little mysteries builds up, and it's very satisfying. So, as she says, yeah, as you have seen these worlds along with me, I believe you already know this, and that's, you know, she's gone through this many, many times. She does remember the looping, but it's not perfect memory. So, she is, for the most part, remembering everything, but she usually doesn't remember like who was the culprit or like exactly why things happened. She's along with us for the ride of trying to solve these individual murders and trying to find that optimal future where her friends don't all tragically die. And yeah, like Hanyu says, Rika, from our perspective, we've lived in these worlds for over 100 years. It's like a 2-week to like a month span of time that they're going through in summer, so Higurashi is like cicada, so creepy soundtrack of cicadas in the background. So, alright, let's talk about Endless 8. For our audiences aware, remain in a span of time. We have the very infamous arc of Haruhi Suzumiya. Endless 8 is in the second season. It is a span of 8 episodes, and it is the same episode every single week. Imagine watching that as it airs. But it's not, from an animation perspective, it is not the same episode. It is animated slightly different every time. The characters are wearing different outfits, they do slightly different events. But Haruhi, who is kind of like a god, but she doesn't know it, she can do things to influence the world around her, and the main character's job is to make sure that she's constantly entertained, so that she doesn't realize that she is a god and do even crazier things. But Haruhi doesn't want her summer vacation to end those last 2 weeks. So she makes time loop 15,532 times. And no one remembers any of this. None of the characters recognize that anything's off until the character Mikuru, who is from the future, can no longer go or like contact that future because it doesn't exist anymore, because time loop. And this is like this, I don't know if you can kind of see, it's big screen. This is like going through each time that it's revealed how many loops it has been. Because there's one character who actually is aware of the looping. Because of her observant nature, she never says anything. So Yuki is like a Rei Ayanami type character, like the strong, silent type, emotionless, who doesn't really say anything or contribute anything, but she's just there to do her job and exist. She's kind of like an alien robot, and she doesn't say anything about it because she doesn't think she has to. But she remembers all of these loops. And she sparks, essentially, an entire movie called The Disappearance of Haruhi Suzumiya, which is a fantastic movie. Everyone should watch it. I mean, everyone should watch Haruhi because it's a classic. But Yuki completely changes in character. She basically, because of the trauma of going through all those time loops, finally essentially snaps and creates a new world where everyone's normal, and she's not like a robot alien. She's just like a shy, tsundere, cute girl. And Kyon, the main character, this guy here, he's like, this is weird, something is off in this world, and he goes and finds original Yuki. He does a little bit of time travel, don't worry about it. And Yuki says that this is like an error that has built up over time because, again, she spent so long in those time loops. And Kyon has to be like, those aren't errors, that's emotions. You're frustrated that you had to live the same 2 weeks 15,500 times. And it's a great movie. You should watch it. I don't recommend sitting and actually watching endlessly. I mean, if you want to do it, you can. It is literally the same episode 8 times, so you, the audience, get to feel a little bit of that torturous time loop. Madoka. So, a very famous example of audience isn't aware, but trying to find an optimal future is Madoka Magica, where late in the series, it's revealed that Homura became a magical girl in order to save the main character, Madoka, which is ironic because Madoka originally became she kind of became a magical girl to save Homura. They didn't really go back and forth, but it was sort of like, we're gonna do this together type thing. And then after some tragic events, Homura decided, I'm going to save you, essentially, and I'm going to keep looping to make sure this tragedy doesn't keep happening. Madoka needs to defeat a big witch enemy and can't do it, and every single time she fails, Homura has to time loop back, and it's been a while. And so what we see is the series, like from episode 1 until we get the montage episode, which I'll talk about, of the time loop, is like the most recent attempt that Homer's doing to save her from Kyubey, which is the little cat, evil gremlin thing. Surprise backstory, pain! So episode 10 is that montage episode of all of the loops, essentially. We learn that Homer's been living in a desperate time loop to try and save Madoka, and this is where we see like rapid fire character growth, right? Is she lives these time loops over and over. We see her like growth in power as a magical girl, but also her descent into despair and this possessiveness over Madoka, who she keeps failing to save, and eventually she learns the truth about like magical girls as a whole, and she says, so her power is like time, essentially. She can stop time, she can manipulate time, and so as the two of them are like lying on their deathbed for the first time that they failed to stop the witch, Madoka says, go back and save stupid me, and Homer says, I'll go back, I'll do it no matter how many times I have to go back and try. But oops, that causes problems. So as many times as it takes, she keeps going back, and she's looking for the one road to save you from destiny of despair, but that's kind of a problem because all of that time looping being centered on Madoka, in this world what it does essentially is like, I don't know, like puts the universe's focus on Madoka, and it makes her into the most powerful witch we've ever seen. So she was kind of being manipulated. Not really, it's more just like her desperate attempt to save Madoka is causing more problems. Alright, let's talk about Revue Starlight. This is my favorite anime, as you can tell. So, I never would have guessed. So Revue Starlight is a story about these stage girls. They're theater kids. And their struggles are played out on the stage in these revues, which are these sort of sword matches. It's like Revolutionary Girl Utena style, meets like Black Rock Shooter is kind of the way I would describe it, with a little bit of Bible thrown in there. But it's mostly, it's a take on Revolutionary Girl Utena, putting the Takonazuka Revue back into it so that it's like back on the girls' sword fighting and putting the theater back into it. So they're all very ambitious, and they all want like to be the top star or the otokoyaku, which is like the, in simple terms, like the lead performer of the troupe, essentially. And so these battles that happen are them fighting in this audition to claim that spot as the top star. So there's just one girl who feels that they've already peaked. You know, when you peak in high school, when you go to theater school and you perform the same play for 3 years in a row, sometimes that second performance is, no, it's the first performance is just so good that nothing can top it. And so you don't like the future, because future's scary. But here in this span of time, we are happy. So Nana Daiba has been the top star of the 99th class for about 60 loops, which are about a year long. And so throughout the show, a bunch of characters, so this is the main character here, Karen, she's the one in red. And we see like a lot of her reviews essentially fighting for this lead spot. She's the classic Genki kind of girl. And here comes Nana Daiba being like, I'm gonna be the villain now. And actually, I should have brought this up. I'm gonna play for you a little bit, like the beginning of her song. Cause it's like, you know, you get all these like nice kind of upbeat, very heartfelt songs. And then here comes Nana with the most Disney villain-esque song you've ever heard. Nice. It's just like creepy, right? And how I play the intro. So she takes, oh my god, that was louder than me playing the phone to the microphone. Anyway, she takes on the villain role for a few episodes as she asserts her ideals that we need to remain within this span of time, this time loop, this performance, because this is safe, this is the best. And so the part that right before the part that I played, they all get like this epic introduction before all the reviews, and her spoken intro is, the fruits are ripe upon the stage, but they are soft and someone must protect them. She has this very protective nature over all the other girls. She's like the mother character. She makes muffins for everyone, and she tries her best to make everyone happy, a little too forcefully. She has this idea of everyone kind of in her brain of how they should be, and fighting ensues because Karen, the main character, is very adamant that like, no, we have to keep moving on, we get better day by day, you know, we can't stand on the same stage twice, it's always different, we have to keep moving on. And Nana's like, no, I like this time loop. So this is where we get to one of the big moral dilemmas of time loop. There are several. There's a lot of things you can talk about with time loops, but my favorite thing to talk about is this question of what's better, to stay in the time loop or to leave it. So before we get to that, I'm going to show you this now. This is just some other examples in my rapid fire categorizing. If you want to take a picture of this, these are all shows except for Punchline. I don't recommend Punchline. But all shows that feature time loops in some sort of way that I would recommend. So if you are interested, before we move on to other things. So I want to take a quick break talking from that dilemma. I promise it's going to come back later, and I promise everything I say is going to be relevant. But talking about some other ways to mess with time that do include time loops, but we have what is called in The Girl Who Leapt Through Time, which is a very prominent time loop genre staple, called a time leap, in which you're not necessarily looping, you could be looping, but it's more of choosing a specific point to jump back to. So the question then becomes, and the dilemma of, what if you could go back and redo your mistakes? What if you were really meticulous about everything you did and wanted to make sure it was perfect? Well, you could just keep looping back and fix everything, and you're the only one experiencing it, right? Unless, you know, another character also knows that you're looping, but don't worry about that. You can fix all your mistakes. Would you take the chance to, even if it had consequences? And that's the dilemma in Life is Strange. At the very end, so this character Max, she has, you know, the ability to do short hops back in time, and she can do them as many times as she wants. And she does a lot to try and fix the situation, like the relationships going on in her life, and to save her romantic interest, Chloe, from constantly dying. Very like ghost trick thing, just characters keep dying and having to bring them back to life. But all of that looping, very similar to Madoka Magica, all of that looping causes problems, and eventually a big storm comes up, and it's the result of all that looping. It's also very like Neo, The World Ends With You. It's the same situation where all of that, all that looping back that Rendo does causes a huge like bout of energy and problems that's going to destroy the world. So the question, or in Life is Strange's case, it's only going to destroy one town, but the question is, do you save Chloe, who you've been working so hard all game to save, at the cost of destroying everyone else in the town, who you also have been like making relationships with, trying to, you know, make things better? Or do you let Chloe die and go back to the very beginning of your looping and basically stop yourself from ever doing any of that and letting, you know, the natural course of things happen? So that's the big moral dilemma in Life is Strange. If you go back and redo your mistakes, but there's consequences, but you still do them. And then you have things like Link Click and Tokyo Revengers, which are very specific leaps back in time, where it is a specific point in time that the characters go back to live, or to either change or experience those events. So like Link Click, the characters, I love this shit by the way, these characters can enter into photographs and to go into the past and experience events, and they use that information. They're like informants essentially. Or Tokyo Revengers, where when the main character travels back in time, it's an exact span, I think 12 years, I don't remember, it's been a little bit since I've seen Tokyo Revengers, but it's a like specific time that they can hop back to and change or experience events. And that, you know, changing events, that's the whole butterfly effect, right? That's whether it's looping that one specific time or if it's just changing one event, that is your butterfly effect. And I also put The Strange Life of Ivan Osakin here. This is one of the first like sci-fi books that feature time loops, or I say time loops kind of loosely. It's more of like the time loop of going back and experiencing things in the past over and over again to try and fix your mistakes. And it's referenced pretty often in a lot of time loop media. So, and now I can talk a little bit about The Girl Who Leapt Through Time. So the main character, Makoto, has a not good, very bad day, ending with her bike brakes failing and almost getting hit by a train before she jumps back to the beginning of the day. And she discovers that she can time leap, essentially, and she can basically hop forward and back however she wants, and she can loop the day over and over again until she gets it right. And it's a very, like, staple Groundhog Day kind of how the media of time loops is usually set up, of like, here's the events that happen. Maybe they're not great, and you're thinking, oh, I want to go back and fix that. And then a character like maybe goes to sleep or dies or something, and then they wake up, and then you're seeing all the events play out. So, like, in the loop. So Makoto leaps with reckless abandon, and pretty selfishly too. She does things like what I would do, which is get extra sleep. Like she'll wake up, like she'll go to sleep, she'll wake up, and then she'll be like, I'm still tired. So she'll hop back like a couple hours to get more sleep, which good for her. But she also gets caught in conversations where you've got the guy on the bike, Chiaki. he at one point confesses to her that he likes her and asks her out, and she keeps like trying to go back and redo this conversation over and over because she's trying to avoid it, and you can see how that will cause problems. But if you're interested in the genre, this is a pretty big staple, so I would recommend watching it. Non-linear storytelling. This can have loops if you want it, or it can just be kind of funky. So these are stories like Bakano and Durarara, which are very similar in their story structure, or 13 Sentinels, which has literally everything you want. We got time travel, we got time loops, we got funky timelines, everything. Love this game. And they all feature a bunch of characters, and they all exist at different points in time, different points in the story, and everything is just jumbled. You don't know when characters are looping, you don't know what connects to what, and you slowly have things come together to complete the mystery, and it's so satisfying when stories are told this way, when you hit that like, oh moment of this is how things were happening, this is the actual order of events, this is like how the looping fixes, this is like these characters were talking to each other, that kind of thing. I know Durarara is pretty popular. Bakano is also one of my favorite animes, but can highly recommend. Let's talk about Uchikoshi time. So, Kotaro Uchikoshi makes some video games. The Zero Escape series, and I, the Somnium Files, and World's End Club. And the way that he often uses time is that what might seem like looping, because you're going to go back to the past quite often and experience the same events over and over, are actually parallel universes branching off. Most of his games use like the multi-worlds interpretation of decisions will split the timeline, and what's interesting is how the games work and how these universes talk to each other. So there's that mess right there. Now it's messy, but it's accurate. It's an accurate depiction of what, except for one little thing. There's one little plot right here where there should be another branch and it doesn't, but we're not gonna worry about it because we don't wanna make it even more complicated. It's messy, but it's also clean, because it's a clean representation of what's going on. But what's cool about the way that his games work is that you might hit a dead end in one timeline, such as needing a password for like a computer or something. And there's no way any of the characters could have found that password in this timeline, so you gotta go searching in a different timeline to find it. And that's cool, because you're going and revisiting the same events, but slightly different things are happening, and you might find the thing you need to complete another route, and so you're hopping all over the place. And I think it's satisfying, at least. I love these games. And this is kind of where we get, the branching, is where we get things like the Tatami Galaxy, and these two movies, To Every You I've Loved Before and To Me the One Who Loved You. I'll talk about the Tatami Galaxy first. It is another time loop book and anime. It was adapted. It's very abstract, so it's a little hard to watch. The characters talk very, very fast, because that's kind of the point, is that everything is abstract and weird. But the way that this show works is that the main character, who does not have a name, because the book is told in first person, so the character never gets a name, he's in college, and he's kind of sad and miserable because he joined a club at the beginning of his first year thinking that everything was going to be all peachy and great, and then this other character comes into his life and ruins everything, and he regrets going in that club, and everything sucks. But it's okay, at the end of the episode, I don't actually know what happens at the end, but when you start the next episode, he joined a different club. And we get to see how his life got ruined in that club, too. And we follow that formula for a while as we slowly learn more about the main cast in this time loop-esque series. It does from a watching and reading standpoint. I think technically this is a branching thing where it's technically parallel worlds, but from watching it, it's basically, we're just seeing it. It's like Higurashi, where at the end of every episode, we're just gonna go back and time loop back to the beginning and see something different. And then we have these two movies. The idea with these two movies is that you can watch them in either order, I do not actually recommend this. I highly recommend if you're going to watch them, you watch To Me, the One Who Loved You first. But they are essentially about the same thing, about the multi-worlds interpretation. And so we get to see the main character's life in two different circumstances. His parents get a divorce, and at the beginning he gets to choose which parent to go with, essentially. And we get to see the different versions of his life depending on which parent he chose. But there's plenty of loop-in, there's plenty of branching, like within the movies talk to each other. They're a little overwhelming to watch, but I can still very highly recommend them as pieces in this genre. And then here we go with our other main type of time loop, the information gathering loop, which is mostly seen in video games because you, the player, are going through the loop trying to do something. You have a goal. So generally these fall into the Audience is Aware Optimal Future category, where the goal of the game is to gather enough information to discover what's going on and to leave the loop. And you can read into this however much you want. You could say your New Game Pluses are like this. You could say, oh, I finished the game, I'm gonna go play it again, I got new information. Is that a time loop? I don't know, think about it. But with these games, essentially, you're usually dropped into a time loop. Maybe you have a time limit, like Majora's Mask, or in 12 minutes, this top-down game where you have a certain amount of time. Sometimes it's real-life time, sometimes it's an in-game timer, but you have a certain amount of time to do something, and then you're gonna loop back. You don't have a choice, and there are many different paths, and you gotta go down all of them to get what information you need in order to do what you gotta do and break the loop. Obviously, Majora's Mask is I wouldn't say originator, but like, kind of the most important one here. So Link, our guy, same Link as Ocarina of Time, falls into the land of Termina, where the moon's gonna fall in 72 hours, and the townspeople can't decide whether to stay for the carnival or to evacuate because the moon's fallen. But there's so much else going on, and the atmosphere in Majora's Mask is very, very oppressive. It's very Nocturne-esque, as I like to say. And it's heavy, and it really instills that, like, the tragedy of time loops, I think, is very, very well articulated in the atmosphere of this game. The forest is poisoned, the mountain is frozen, the bay is covered in fog. Link's masks contain dead spirits in them, and that's how he's able to turn into the Deku Scrub, the Goron, and the Zora. So that's fun. You can have fun clearing the dungeons, or you can take your time and go do all those side quests and let the moon fall. Sometimes you have to do those side quests and they take up a whole loop. And Link can take as much time as he wants. It doesn't matter. He's got the Ocarina of Time. Song of Time. Go back. Doesn't matter. Everything's fine. I also want to talk about one of my favorite Doctor Who episodes, because this is the sci-fi convention and I can't use all anime examples. But this is generally one of my favorite episodes of Doctor Who. I'm one of the few people I know who actually think 12th Doctor is the best. You don't really need a lot of context here, but the Doctor finds himself trapped in a castle. There's a weird entity chasing him. If it touches him, he's gonna die. He knows this. All he can do is survive and seek a way out. Did this no, it didn't load. All right, never mind. But the next bullet was gonna be, since it didn't load, is that he is in this loop. What he eventually figures out. So the way that this episode is structured is that he is the only character. He's constantly talking to himself. This is right after Kara dies, so he's like in the process of grieving her, and he finds himself trapped in this, what he thinks is like a torture chamber, because he's constantly being chased, and what he eventually figures out is that this giant like wall is the exit, and the only way out is to just hit it, is to just smack it, and it's harder than Diamond, and it takes him billions of years spent in a time loop, because eventually the entity is going to catch him, but he eventually figures out how to get down here, and how that he's going to get out is that he's got to whack this wall. And we get a great montage at the end of the episode of him going very quickly through all of these loops, and he says, oh my god, but he like looks at the stars, and the first time that we see this loop, he says, I feel like I've been transported 7,000 years into the future, and then slowly it increases. He's like, it's like 100,000 years into the future, 1,000,000 years into the future, millions of years into the future, 1,000,000,000 years, billions of years. And by the time this episode's over, he's spent a majority of his life like in this time loop, which is kind of wild, considering like how old the Doctor is. But I don't know, it's a very powerful episode and a very good example of like the audience's unaware optimal future of trying to get out, but being trapped in this constant hellscape. He constantly, like, his first instinct is, I'm in a torture chamber, and then eventually he figures out that he's looping and has to keep looping. He has to keep killing himself so that he can turn back time and loop, just so that he can eventually get out. And this is where, like, the dilemma comes in, right? Like, what are we doing any of this for? If we can just keep looping, what's the point of trying to get out, of finding this optimal future? What if we just, like, song of time, guys? It doesn't matter. We got side quests we want to go do. You know, the cafe side quest for Majora's Mask. It's fine. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how many people die. I don't know. Oh, good. You're back, Zhangli. Let's talk about Genshin Impact.
Take the slide back. I gotta see my husband.
There he is. We're talking about Heaven Sent, the time loop episode. You know. So, Genshin has two pretty good instances of time loops. One is like the actual physical time loop that happens in Genshin, which I really like, which is the Subceres Festival. It's part of the Sumeru Archon quest, where basically a time loop's happening, no one remembers it, but little bits of information, Ether or Lumine, the Traveler, is remembering. And at one point, Paimon wants some candy from a stall. It's one of those like cup shuffling thing, or it's like, you know, it's in one of these boxes. Choose which box is, you know, under, and you only get one chance. And eventually, you go through it enough times, and those are your dialogue options for which one it is. Number 4, number 4, number 4, number 4, number 4. And I was like, oh, that's like the sickest thing. I love that. Thanks, Genshin. That's a very like good gameplay mechanic for like showing for like what the Traveler is thinking and the information that's piling on in their brain. There is only one choice. And then we have the beginning of what I like to call a metaphorical time loop, which is maybe time is not actually turning back, but we are staying in one spot, one span of time, one state, as it were, because it's comfy. And we don't want to leave that. Like A, who is the Electro Archon, who meditates in the plane of Euthymia and has Inazuma, which is her nation, in this. Inazuma is a representation of isolationist Japan. And so she has this like decree of nothing can change, we must preserve eternity, is how she puts it. And you know, we gotta get her to change her mind. I'm gonna talk about Xenoblade now because, oh boy, if y'all want time loop pain, well, not actually a time loop. We have looping of life and death here. So we got Bad Boy N over here, who is broken down over time because in this world, life and death mean basically nothing. Every character is only gonna live for 10 years, and then they're gonna die, and everyone's at war, constantly. And the world only exists to be at war. So after being worn down by so many loops of trying to escape this war with the people he loves, N accepts what is called the endless now. And the main villain of Xenoblade Chronicles 3 is literally the combined anxiety of two worlds about the future, being like, future's scary, let's stay in this time, in this weird space, even though we're like, I mean, it's a war, but war is better than the future. And he believes that this endless now of eternal war is genuinely safer and better than letting these two worlds that had come together like separate again. And he says, you can't see it, it's too small, but he loses the person he loves, and he's like, I will rewind our clocks back to the start. The whole theming of this game is the clocks, except they're British, so they say flame clocks. Yeah, they're all British, don't worry about it. But then you have this character named Shania. And she is born into the resistance against the war, which means that she's actually free from that 10-year loop of life and death. She will live, she will grow up, and she'll be fine. But to her, the idea of being reborn, to be able to loop over and over again, appeals to her because she hates her lot in life, but if she could live over and over again and just keep doing it, eventually she'll get that perfect life. She wants to, if everything is so flawed, why don't we just keep redoing it over and over again? Because then eventually we'll be happy, we'll get it right, as she says, but I will be born once again just the way I should be. I have not one thing to my name, I don't even have the power to choose. But, she doesn't want to become Mobius because she wants to be immortal, she wants to live in that cycle of loops. A lot of people hate her. I think she's neat. I mean, she's a villain, but I think she's neat because this is an interesting take against just wanting to be immortal. This is specifically wanting to live in the loops. Then we got Nier. Nier Automata just comes out and flat out says it. Everything's meaningless. War? There's this war going on. It's been going on for so long. The number of how many years it's been is too long to remember. It doesn't matter. It's been billions of years between this war of machines and androids. And the whole idea is that, we're fighting so that humanity can come back to Earth. Humanity's dead. It doesn't matter. 2B and 9S, you know what 2B looks like. That's her. They've been living in this cycle where they're just trying to gain information. 9S learns too much. 2B has to kill him. This has happened 43 times. And Project Yorha, which is the group making these the androids essentially and sending them off to the war. They're the war androids. They just erase everything and start over. Sometimes there's this thing called the logic virus, which is this, tragic thing that anyone who gets infected with it has to die. That's their thing. That's their own biological warfare that they spread so that they can reset everything and keep this war going because humanity's dead. They have nothing to fight for, but we have to do it just to perpetuate something. Because again, what's the point, right? If everything's meaningless, who cares if the moon falls in Termina? Who cares if everyone dies? It's just one loop. You can go back, you can jump, it's fine. Who cares if we hit this ending? It's fine. We can time loop back, it's fine. Who cares if you have to say goodbye to everyone you love? Everyone's going to die. It doesn't matter. You can just time loop back. It doesn't matter if she dies. You're not gonna remember your death. She doesn't remember her death. She's gonna go back to the beginning. She's gonna wake up and go, how did I die? Doesn't matter. We have to solve the mystery now. Oh no, Akane with the chainsaw. Uh-oh, it's fine. We can just jump to a different timeline. Doctor's gonna die. It's fine. He's going to loop back. It's fine. The storm, it's fine. We can fix it if we just stay in the time loop. Everything's meaningless. And what if we take that a step further, right? What if we say it's not real at all? What if we say the natural evolution of time loops, simulation theory? What if we say that we're living in these loops, we're living in this weird situation where time is already wonky, my life sucks, what if it's not real? What if it's a simulation? Then that means the bad stuff isn't real, and that means that what happens in here doesn't matter. Aini is a fun game, but it makes a very prominent point to say, which is an interesting point to make, I will say, that there are no what-ifs in this world, and that you can agonize over it all you want, but you cannot go back and change your path, which is an interesting thing for a game to say that is all about going down different pathways to find the right answer. But Aini makes a point to say that all of the tragedy that happened in the past, this game there's a 6-year time skip in the middle of the game, to say that all of that tragedy that happened, you have to look at it. You can't avert your eyes. You have to accept it. You have to say that it was real, that it happened. And that's kind of where we land with Everything Everywhere All at Once, where Jobutupaki, aka Joy, who's the main character, Evelyn's daughter, exists as what I like to call an Akane Kurashiki character, where she's basically the same person in every universe, and she can jump around. And she's seen everything. Like with Flowey, from the beginning of the presentation. She's seen everything, she's experienced everything, and gone so far to the point of believing that it's all meaningless. And we eventually get a very nice mother-daughter resolution, but it comes at the cost of Evelyn becoming like Joy to the point where she says, all right, in order for me to understand you and save you, I have to become like you. And they come to an understanding where Evelyn realizes even through, like, you know, she has a phase in the middle of the movie where she's like, this is too much, I see what you mean, I'm gonna go destroy everything, until she meets a different version of her husband who says, in another life, I would have really liked just doing laundry and taxes with you, and she comes to realize that even the weird lives did matter, and that way she can directly oppose her daughter when she says that nothing matters. And we get that message again in Persona 3. Sorry, I know we're wrapping up. So, the epilogue of Persona 3 is called The Answer, and the message is that it's okay to move on. So, sorry, spoilers for Persona 3, it's been many years since it's come out. The main character, Makoto, dies, and at the end of Persona 3, they actually don't know why he's dead. And in The Answer, which is this epilogue, the cast is trapped in a time loop of a single night, essentially, and given the opportunity to go back in time, essentially, and potentially undo his death. His death, by the way, was a sacrifice to save the entire world. So a couple different factions of characters arise, of people who say, we should go save him because he's our friend and we care about him, and if we have the opportunity, we should make him not dead. And other characters who, oh my god, shut up, computer. Other characters who say, no, we need to honor his sacrifice because he sacrificed for us. And eventually, after finding out the truth of why he died, the characters decide to leave the loop and move onward, and we get the famous line of Yukari saying, I'm ready to start the morning of April 1st, and which is, the next day, past the time loop. And so, maybe it's okay to leave the time loop. No!
No! We need a time loop right now!
There's one more slide, hang on, I'm gonna plug this in. Damn computer, you couldn't have warned me more than 2 minutes before you die.
You need a time loop so bad.
I know we really do. There's nowhere to plug this in.
Oh,
it's back.
Oh, there.
No, yes.
Oh, there too.
Alright, I'll talk you through the last slide until my computer comes back on. So, everything is great. Maybe things aren't so meaningless after all. And the last thing that I kind of want to talk about are two video games that I like to compare that are about this point. That maybe even though we've jumped through so much, we've gone through all these timelines, we've gone through all of these loops, maybe it's not meaningless. And those are Virtue's Last Reward and Pokemon Mystery Dungeon 2 Explorers of Sky. Two totally normal video games to compare. But the big point at the end of them is that what happened in these timelines mattered. Even though maybe not everyone remembers them, but hey, you player, you remember them. And hey, us characters who went through all that experience, we remember. I don't think this outlet's on. But one of the characters, Tamioji, has this great speech at the end where he describes this scenario of, essentially of his life, where, so VLR is an apocalypse scenario. It takes place in a ruined future where the point of the game is essentially a training arc for a character to learn how to time loop, how to jump, how to time leap, go back in time, fix things. And Tenmyoji is there to say, cool, but I can't jump back in time, and I lived through that hell, and that mattered. I have a kid now. if you go back and take away all this, he's not going to exist anymore, and I care about him. Like, maybe it was tragic, maybe it was a lot to go through, but it mattered because I experienced it and find meaning in it. And the same thing is true of Mystery Dungeon. Oh, it's coming back. It's coming back. I can show you the last slide. And the same thing is true in Pokemon Mystery Dungeon Explorers of Sky, or Time, Darkness, and Sky, of the character who, twist villain Dusk Noir, who's from the future, who is trying to prevent the characters from fixing the past because it means, okay, great, because it means that it would erase the apocalyptic future that they experienced. And you have the character of Grovyle, who is who at the beginning of the game you think is the villain because he's trying to steal all the time gears, but no, he's the one trying to fix the past. And Dusk Noir comes in and is like, I'm afraid you're gonna like erase the future and my existence. And Grovyle says, even if that's true, we owe the past, the younger generation, this chance to go on living, essentially. We owe it to them. It doesn't erase what we lived, because that still matters. We've gone on this journey together to, you gonna turn on? Come on. We've gone on this journey together, and it mattered. And I think that's maybe, I mean, it's kind of a trolley problem thing, right? Where there's no real solution to the moral dilemma of time loops of whether to leave the loop or not. But even though things might seem meaningless, they're not. You, the player, are living through all those loops in Majora's Mask. Link is remembering, even though he's a silent protagonist and isn't going to say anything. You can tell something's a little wrong with him in Majora's Mask. And I mean, you look at Twilight Princess and you're like, oh yeah, I think you built up some trauma from those time loops in there, just like Yuki in Haruhi Suzumiya, who made an entire alternate world because of the trauma she experienced in those time loops, living it over and over again. So it's a perfect tragedy, but you experienced it, and so it matters. And there's my big point. Yeah. Maybe my computer will turn back on and I can show you the
last slide.
The actual last slide says questions, comments, other time loops.
Hey!
What? Yeah, it sure is. It's that same thing of like, Monica says, oh, this loop isn't good, I need to make adjustments because just like Nana Daiba, I am too controlling of the people around me.
What's in my game really hit me out of nowhere?
Yeah. Well, horror games. Horror works so well with time loops. It's kind of perfect. There we go. And One Shot. Someone at Anime Boston asked me about One Shot. They were like, have you played One Shot? Oh my god, all right, hang on. I'm not showing you all my Discord. And my Steam's gonna open and scream at me.
Oh yeah. Oh god, that's the worst.
Come here, Google. One Shot is so good. But it was so funny. They asked me, they were like, have you played One Shot? And I went, I've played, oh, you can't see. But I revealed my screensaver. I say, I've played One Shot. All right, here we go. There we go. So, Temyoji gives this speech that he makes up about this like biker gang of saying like they took a fork in a road and maybe a lot of people died, but good things still happened during that road trip, and that mattered. And again, Pokemon Mystery Dungeon, Grovyle saying, it matters, and you can be afraid. Dusk Noir's whole thing is, I don't want to disappear. I don't care if we have to live in this apocalypse, I don't want to disappear. And Zero Escape works again on that world hypothesis, so it doesn't matter what happens. Like, you can change the past, it's not going to change the future. The future has already happened. We exist in this time. So he says basically, like, you might think that this timeline doesn't matter because you can go back and fix things and make a new path. But I live here, to live with this. So, and it's not all bad. I like what happened. It mattered. And Pokemon Mystery Dungeon doesn't operate on that. So it's like that if you change the past, it will change the future. But Dustin says, like, we owe them this gift, and we're here now. We exist in this moment, and what we lived and what happened in this timeline matters. There you go. Now questions, comments, and other time loops. Yay. Yay. Yippee. Yippee. Thanks, y'all. Unless you have questions, comments, or other time loops to talk about. We got, what, 3 minutes? We got 3 minutes. Yeah.
There's a series of books called The Dreamers by David and Lee Eddings.
Yeah.
And the thing you just said at the end about what happened matters even though it kind of is undone. Like, when I finished reading that story, to sum up, there's this big bad monster, there's these disparate countries that are all kind of xenophobic, and they find ways to unite and find common ground to fight this crazy, strong, powerful enemy that's going to destroy them all. But the way they win is by going back in time and making sure that enemy is never born. So
yeah.
it seems to me to build up over 4 books, all these characters finding these relationships, and then at the end being like, oh, none of that ever happens and all these nations just kind of stay the same. So maybe if I reread it with that kind of mindset, that maybe it won't be so disappointing to me.
Y'all remember reading The Alchemist in school? Did anyone read The Alchemist? Okay, this was like my AP lit, like required reading, and the whole book is like he goes on this long journey to find like buried treasure or whatever. Weird magic happens. At the very end, he finds out that the treasure he was looking for was like back home, and the first time you read it, you're like, this was pointless. Why did I read this book? But it's one of those, the journey is the point, not the destination. And that kind of applies here, where you could say, oh, like, we might go back and make things never happen. It might cause a bootstrap paradox. We don't gotta worry about that, this is fiction. But it still was like that journey that mattered, finding the solution, like, you know, going back in time. And then the dilemma of, oh, should we do that? So, yeah.
Remind me to tell you about my current D&D campaign because it's actually.
Oh, I love when you stick a time loop in D&D. Taz. Yeah.
Oh, it's just 2 enemies that I'm telling the enemies to mention that are my favorites.
Yeah.
One Future Diary.
Yeah. Let me go back to the. Where's that slide? I moved it. It used to be at the end of the presentation, and then I was like, I'm gonna put it here instead. But yeah. There it is.
That's the one that's on Erase.
Yeah.
That's one of my favorites too. That one of the concept of childhood, everything at the time, but he's older now.
Yeah. Again, yeah, the going back in time. Can we fix things? Can we not? It's very, like, I compared Race to, like, Tokyo Revengers a lot. And not same type of time travel, but, like, yeah. Yeah, all right, I think that's time. So thank you all so much for coming. Definitely the first time I've ever presented this.
Yes.
Wait, Carter, take the photo.
Is
I've
that
got
the
a-
slide.
Huh?
What slide was it on?
I don't think it was just a picture of me. So basically, I'm gonna, like, every time I do this, it's the first time I've ever done it because.
Oh, I love
Oh,
that.
wait, sorry, I have to get the Anime Boston Dapple me.
Oh yeah, oh that's so important. Because we're
Oh,
definitely at
that's
Anime Boston
perfect.
right now, you guys.
Yes.
Okay, I took a million.
All right, thank you all.
Could you do me a huge favor and go to the slide where it had Majora's Mask on
I
it?
sure can.
'Cause I wanted to look at those other games that were on there.
Oh yes. This one.
Yes, just real quick.
Yes.
It went away before I could get a picture.
Okay, I'll go through these really quick. Nosha, single player Among Us, so addicting. Rapid fire, time loop, like mafia style games. Great. 12 minutes, pretty short. It's a top-down adventure thing where you're trying not to die. You got 12 minutes. You die, you time loop. I haven't actually played Deathloop. I know it's popular, I haven't actually played it. Don't ask me. Forgotten City is you are in like Rome and everyone's dying. You gotta figure that out. You gotta go through. It's a very classic. Like you gotta keep going through the loop, talk to different people, do different things, and you have to do it over a bunch of loops to find things. Outer Wilds, I feel like I don't need to explain Outer Wilds. This is just like go explore, learn the truth of this world. You only have, 22 minutes until one of the suns or one of the stars explode. Go explore. I Was a Teenage Exocolonist is incredible. It is, it's about this colony on another planet that you make, and you get to like explore, learn about the world, and lots of different paths. Find information about the planet, about different people, one of those things. And yeah, those are just my favorites. There are obviously way more, but these are the ones I wanted to highlight. So.
Are these all games?
Yes, so these are all games.
And the other side was animes.
These are all anime. Guys, originally I made this to be at an anime convention, so sorry. This is just my interest. I know that there are more, because time loops are a very like sci-fi staple thing, so.
Yeah, like Star Trek has lots of them.
Oh yeah. And like I said with the Doctor Who episode, that's my that's my favorite episode. There are more episodes that are like that feature time loops, or like, you know, he gets in the TARDIS and he just jumps back over and over again, but that's like true secluded time loop figure things out. Yeah, correct.
Doesn't Community have a time loop?
I don't know, I haven't seen Community.
I know that it's not like technically a time loop, but where would like the like Weeping Angels fit in for that? 'Cause
I guess I'd put that here with the like throw you back to a specific point in time, the time leaping, rather than the like actually looping, because most of the time we don't hear from any of the characters who have been Weeping Angeled like ever again.
Yeah.
I saw you had Higurashi on there.
Yeah.
But also the wonderful other work that
Umi
Higurashi
Neko.
did, Umi Neko, where it's a time loop as a metagame.
Yeah, there's a lot. Higurashi's a lot compared to Umi Neko. Higurashi's very tame. There's a lot going on in Umi
There's so
Neko.
much going on in Umi Neko, but like
I'd
seriously,
stick
Umi
Umi Neko
is
here,
so-
honestly, or not here.
Honestly
Here.
though, like, yeah, I really like the way that it plays as like time loops as a metagame, because you know you have the fact that time is looping, but all the characters are conscious of it.
Yes, unlike Higurashi, because
Yeah.
Umi Neko was a game within a game. Like the Umi Neko character, it's like a wider chessboard kind of situation happening.
Exactly.
So yeah.
So like, Higurashi, yeah, you have like the one person, like the two people really who know they're time looping, but they don't really have any impact on it. Whereas Umi Neko, everyone knows they're looping.
Everyone knows too much. All right, I think I gotta vacate here, but thank you all again so much for coming.
There is a